I'm Chris. You got to see me downstairs a little bit ago. A little bit about me. I'm the managing partner for White Law Office. And see all these people. Cody's coming in here because she needs some emotional support. So, what managing partner of the law office is kind of like the Queen of England. I've got a lot of figurative authority, but not any real authority. So I spend a lot of time running the office, a lot of time out talking about the office in different places. I'm really happy you guys have come to hear about this, because this topic is initially at first glance not one that is like, hey, yeah, I want to go talk about my emotions. That's really not what we're going to do, but that's the way it's interpreted when you talk about the issue of emotional intelligence. It's like, how easy do I cry? How easy do I... None of that. We're going to go a little bit deeper into the way your brain actually works. So we're going to open up your skull a little bit. We're going to look inside, and we're going to talk about you and what makes you you, and then we're going to focus down into the one thing about yourself that you can change, which is your emotional intelligence. So, when we talk about you and yourself, there are three main areas that largely you can break yourself down into. The first part is your IQ. Second part is your EQ, or your emotional intelligence. And the last is your personality. How many people in here have taken like a DISC profile? MBTI? Anything like that? Yeah? So, I mean, the Big Five. Has anybody taken the Big Five? That's a new one on the block over the last decade. That's apparently very good. I haven't taken it myself. When we talk about these different areas of yourself, how do we talk about it? Well, your intelligence quotient is the measure of your reasoning ability. We'll often say, well, that person's really smart, they have a high IQ. Not necessarily the same thing. It is how fast you process the information that the world is giving you. Somebody who has a really high IQ, they're the ones that, they're like right there all the time. And they're really on top of that. It's not that if given time somebody else couldn't get to that conclusion, they just might not get to it within the first 5 seconds. Sometimes it's just the processing speed. And there's a lot of things that influence IQ. And so there are some folks that are high on the scale, low on the scale. It does not mean how smart they are. It just means how quickly they process the input and data coming in. And some of us are supercomputers, and some of us are Tandy 1000. Personality. Personality is never an excuse for bad behavior. Let's get that out of the way. You cannot say, oh, I'm just an extrovert, therefore I'm going to be boisterous and out loud and everything. That's just the way I am. Or I'm an introvert. I like to be quiet and reserved, and that's just the way. It's never an excuse. It is a way to figure out your preferences for how you will perceive information and make decisions. For instance, how many of you would guess, given introvert, extrovert, what do you think I am? How many people say extrovert? 2 of you, 3 of you. How many of you say introvert? You guys are in the introvert side, and all the rest of you just think I'm some hybrid of in between, apparently. I'm an introvert, which means this about me, purely. This takes energy and doesn't give it. It means I can be really good at public speaking, and it means I can enjoy public speaking. But what it is it is putting out energy instead of giving it back. Extrovert, if I was an extrovert, this would leave me like, I'm going to run through a wall after I'm done with this. After I'm done with today, I'm going to go lay down on my couch. Not because I didn't enjoy it, not because I didn't have a great time doing it, but because it took from me the whole time I was doing it versus giving back. And so it's never an excuse that, oh, I'm an introvert, so I'm not going to get up and talk. It's just understanding the impact of what it's going to have. And lastly, your emotional intelligence. This is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express your emotions. And how you handle interpersonal relationships with discernment and empathy. Real quick, everybody know what empathy means? Anybody want to volunteer? I spent 6 years teaching high schoolers. I'm pretty sure I can wait you out. Anybody want to offer a, yeah?
Stand with and go with them together.
Sure, good. That's a good analogy. You're understanding and with that person where they are, and you're picking up what the other person's putting down. Have you ever been with somebody who just can't read the room? Have you ever had a friend who they come in at 50,000 miles an hour, and you know this room is like, You try and get them to sit down and be, because they just can't, they lack empathy. They lack the ability to pick up what other people are putting down emotionally. A strong empathetic person can almost get swept up in what other people are feeling. So there's a balance there. But empathy is ability to pick up the signals other people are putting out. So I'm going to focus not quite so much on your IQ today, because your IQ is hardwired in. I'm sorry to say, you will process the way you will process from the time you are a toddler till you die. Your IQ is what your IQ is, and there's nothing wrong with where your IQ is on the scale. There's nothing wrong with mine is on the scale. It's just the reality of how we process. So we need to learn how to give ourselves time if it takes us a little longer. But we also need to remember, if we process quickly, we need to not jump before we've looked at all of the issues. So wherever you are on that, the only thing with IQ when it comes to your personhood, challenge yourself to continue learning. Read, or pick up and listen. I drove back and forth to Akron every day during law school. I got into the habit of just listening to stories, listening to podcasts. I finally got a riding more instead of walking, so now I can put on my headphones and listen to podcasts the whole time. Read or listen. Seek out places where you are not the smartest person in the room. There are a lot of smart people in this room today, and I'm sure that sometimes when you go back to your place of business, you might be the smartest person in the room. You saw the wisdom of coming here and participating in this and working on your business. You go back, and you may be accustomed to that. You need to push yourself into places where you're not, outside of your specialization, outside of where you're comfortable, where you all of a sudden become the student in that situation. It's humbling, but it pushes your brain to develop and to continue to learn. And you use the processing power you have to its maximum potential. Your personality, we already said, using MBTI, DISC, or the Big Five, you will probably, at least most of you in this room, appear to have some grip on where you fall on a personality spectrum. I also recommend Strength Finders. Has anybody ever used Gallup's Strength Finders? It is an easy to read book. Easy to pick up, it's only about this thick. It's something I definitely recommend if you are on the journey of looking at your personality. My top 5 strengths of the Gallup Strengths Finders confirm that I am absolutely useless on day-to-day activities. When it comes to management and running things on a day-to-day activity, my top 5 strength finders, I don't pigeonhole myself and say, oh, it's an excuse. It just confirms I'm really not that good at it. I'm really good at projections, strategic vision, casting a vision, maintaining a vision, keeping things out in front of us. But when it comes to running the day-to-day, I get really bored and distracted. And I tend to squirrel off into other things, which is never healthy for anybody. Know who you are and how you best make decisions. That's the purpose of personality testing. Help you come to a grip of, I function like this, and if I do this, I will put myself in the best position possible to make a good decision. If, for instance, let's say you're an introvert, and you've got a day where you're spending it with people, and you're pouring out and pouring out and pouring out, and you do that day after day after day, knowing this is where you're dumping energy out on people, and you never say, I've got to take time to rest. You will break. You will do harm to yourself. You will start functioning at a place where you are less than if you said, I can do this for 4 hours a day, and then I've got to step back and recharge. Why? Because when you recharge, when you say, this is what I need to be at my best, the 4 hours a day you do it is going to be greater than the 8 hours you were trying to force yourself to, because you're operating at your best. not forcing things to happen. And really what we're here to talk about today is the EQ section of things. And that's supposed to be single instead of signal. I like that word though, so we're going to leave it there. It is the single greatest determiner of success in leadership. Your ability to have a high emotional intelligence will determine more about how you progress as a leader than your IQ or your personality. And we're going to talk about why. It's active and empathetic awareness, control, and expression of emotions. I like to talk about personality and EQ like this. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Have you ever been incredibly right about something at the place of work and everybody still opposes you? You ever been right? I mean, it even proved out right months later. You were right. And nobody bought in. In fact, there was opposition against what you were doing. You knew, but you weren't using any emotional intelligence to get buy-in, to pick up what other people were putting down, to address their concerns. You were just saying, I'm right, and that's enough.
That sounds like Trump.
I'm not getting political.
Just as a Trump.
Yes. No, there are,
So confident in himself when he just shoves his like,
there are a lot of leaders, actually, that are exactly like that, from our current president to others that say, this is it, and it's enough that I'm right. The problem is, being right's not enough for everybody else. We live in a social environment, and having a high EQ lets us know, okay, I might be right about this being a tomato, but I've got to figure this out. And so how do we figure it out? This is just a quick, if you guys look for and you're needing something, how many people do we have who have taken a Myers-Briggs or something? How many people do we have that would be in the extrovert category in the room? Or even DISC, that you would put yourself in an extrovert category? How many of you would put yourself in the introvert category? Very good. How many of you would put yourselves in a sensor category, meaning that you thrive on data? You want data, 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 data. How many people in here are data-driven? How many people are you like, I see a pattern developing. I don't know where it came from, and I can't even tell you, but I see it. How many people would say you're more intuitive? You get this gut feeling that it's like, oh, I know they go that way. And somebody says, how do you know that? And you go, I don't know. Yeah, that's me. How many of you would say that you would put yourself in a position where logic is supreme? Couple. How many of you would put you in a position of not feelings, but your values are supreme? How people are treated is more important than logic. How many of you would say that when it comes down to perceiving and judging, the categories at the end there, how many of you say when the decision's made, the door's closed and we move forward from there? How many of you say that? This is a decision and you move. How many of you would say, but there's so many other possibilities. There are infinite possibilities. I don't want to close the door because I might miss out on something. In this room, there's already a mix of these things. And personalities, and understanding the personalities of the people you're working alongside, how they value things. Do they value logic over the values of people, everybody having buy-in? Do they value data versus intuition? That is good because you will develop knowledge of how your coworkers work, and you can bring data to them in a great way. But if you fail to get to the point where you develop emotional intelligence, you will always struggle with buy-in. When you fail to get to a point of where you have a good empathy, understanding, and control of your own emotions, you will fail to get buy-in when you are trying to move things forward. So let's open up your skull for a second and take a look at your brain. It's colorful, I know. There are a couple things that we need to understand, most basically about how all of our brains work. And unless there's something that's aberrant about us, this is just how we operate as a people. The first thing that happens is way back here, at the base of your skull, is the section of your brain that processes everything that's going on. So take 5 seconds, close your eyes. What happened in that 5 seconds? Truck went by. What else happened? It was quiet, except furnace is running. Furnace is running. There was a couple clicks, a couple shift. Your brain is processing thousands of data points of entry all of the time. And right back here at the base of your brain, eyes, ears, all the senses are feeding it data. And it is just inputting data all the time. And that's where it hits first, is the bottom of your head. Where it hits second, go back one there. Okay, so where it hits second is it starts processing that data. Without consciously thinking, your brain is choosing what to pay attention to. You're not telling it unless you intentionally say, I'm going to focus on this. All of the time, everything that's happening, your brain is filtering out information without you telling it to so that you can focus. Because here's the thing, you can't constantly keep everything that's happening in your environment aware of all the time. Your brain would be overwhelmed. That's why sleight of hand tricks work. That's why magicians work when they do illusions, is because they keep your brain focused over here, willingly getting rid of other data. So there's all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's magic. No, they just kept your brain occupied in a different direction. Your brain all the time is processing information and then is choosing what to process along that way. Next, you come to one of the strongest parts of your brain, the fight or flight section. This is the section of your brain that, when engaged, causes your heart to race, get a little sweaty, and you have to either go or run. It causes you to do this. It causes a fight or flight reaction in you. This is something we share very heavily in the animal kingdom, except they have less cognitive power, so they just go. Sometimes we sit there and we just sweat because we don't know what to do with ourselves when this section of our brain gets engaged. Next one is the 800-pound gorilla in your head, your emotional center. The chemical reactions that create the emotions. And why do I call it the 800-pound gorilla? Because this is by far the strongest part of your brain. It will go and go and go long after everything else is exhausted. It will just keep churning. And our problem with the emotional center of our brain, it is not where we process language. Language defines our situations. It defines the input that we've chose to process. But without language, it just eats energy. It eats and circles, and it can become an 800-pound gorilla that can be out of control, because finally, when you get to the very front of your brain, you get to the smallest, weakest part of your brain, which is logic, reasoning, and language. How many 3 or 4 o'clock rolls around in the afternoon and you're just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore today. I have processed and thought and talked and analyzed and done, and your brain just goes, I'm done. That's because it's the least developed. Does not have the strongest muscle group in there. So with this as a basic template, let's talk about emotional intelligence, but in the light of receiving some input. Let's create a low-stress input for you. Think of something that you do all the time. Something that is just rote memory. You can do it. It does not create a lot. But you get a phone call, you get an email, you get a text message, and they're like, hey, I need you to whatever. And it's easy. What happens is that low-stress input runs in through, is processed, skips right over the emotional section of your brain because it doesn't trigger anything. You're accustomed to it. You're okay with it. It's low stress. It hits the front of your head, and you're like, yep, got it, done. Let me stress something for a second. Input is always neutral. Think about that for a second. Input is always neutral. But what if, Chris, my boss comes in and he's like, that is input. That is data that is coming out of them. They may have an agenda. They may have an emotional reaction going on. But that input is neutral. That guy who cut you off and weaved around the buggy too fast and cut you off too, the input is neutral. It does not have a good or a bad. It is merely input hitting your brain. What happens is usually in low stress times, we don't even think about whether it's good or bad. We don't attribute anything to it because it just runs right through our brains and we're able to just deliver on it. But what happens is, let's create a high stress input. You're sitting upstairs, you've got some stuff going on, and all of a sudden you have the front desk call you, and the front desk says, John's here and he wants to argue with you about your invoice. immediately right away. Or the boss would like to see you upstairs. Who does that to people? It's like, if you're like me, immediately go, oh man, what did I do? And you start making up things that you didn't do wrong because you're like, what? Why do they want to see me? Why do they want, what do they want from me? And by the time you get there, you're like, this is horrible. But on the outside, you're like, High stress inputs do something a little bit different. They go in, we choose to receive the input, we choose to process it, but then things get a little sticky. When it hits the emotional center of our brain, whether it's something we don't handle a lot, something we don't like to handle, something that a person that creates stress for us, and we've learned in the past they create stress, what happens is it hits the emotional center of the brain and it starts to kick into the fight or flight. Then it kicks back up into the emotional, and it kicks back down into fight or flight. All of this is happening without you cognitively thinking about it. We cannot control what is happening in the middle there. We have no language for it. We have no reasoning for it. We have no logic for it. It is just going to happen. Why? Because the input was processed as a high stress level of an event, and we start revving up that engine. Ever had a significant other or a family member or a boss come in and they just come in hot because something happened at home, something happened at work, something happened, and you can just feel it coming off of them. You just feel that you're like, oh, this is not going to be good, whatever it is. What's happened is whatever input they receive someplace else is circling. It's going through there. And with a low emotional intelligence, they have no capacity to do anything other than wait for it just to punch through the front of their head, and then all of a sudden it's like, you didn't do this right, and you didn't do this right, and you didn't clean up your room, and why is the dog barfing on the floor? And you're yelling at people about things that actually are ridiculously low stress inputs. And if you have a low emotional intelligence level, you're just going to take out whatever's going on through the simplest next simple input that can get to the front of your brain. Those simple inputs will keep coming. Back the other way. Go back here to the simple inputs real quick. Those simple low-stress inputs will continue to come at you through the day, and you will continue to be able to operate them with these going on all day long, even while this is happening. The problem is, without being aware of ourselves and what happened and what it's doing to us, eventually it'll just catch a ride on the next low-stress input that's going out through your brain, and you will just... That's the technical term for it, by the way. You will just vomit it on somebody else that has nothing to do with why you were actually upset. Have we been there? Have you ever been there? Oh, well, look at the rest of you. You're amazing people. Much better than me. Have you ever found yourself on the receiving end of something that was ridiculously small that gave you a massive reaction? Have you ever been on a receiving end of something like that? It's hard. Because you're like, I just wanted to know what you wanted for lunch. You know? I just wanted to know this simple thing. And that person is just ramped about something. And it's nothing you did wrong. On the flip side, it's nothing the kid did wrong when you walk home stressed about what happened that day. It's nothing the dog did wrong. It's nothing happened. It just is venting itself out there. Emotional intelligence is first about awareness. If you understand your intelligence quotient, if you understand your personality and how you prefer to process data and where you get energy and where you spend energy and how to balance those things, emotional intelligence first step is, I am aware of what this is doing to me right now. Because if you're not aware, you can't go anywhere with it. It's just going to continue to control and honestly ruin relationships. Anybody read the comment section of the internet lately? It is a bad place to go. People all the time are just vomiting. I wonder when I do read those sometimes, I was like, what happened to you? This is about the space shuttle taking off. What do you mean talking about President Trump in the space shuttle taking? It's like they take whatever the next most simple input is, and the internet is so great about it because it's anonymous. You do it without having to see what's happening, and you take that simple input that came through, and it just catapults whatever's going on inside that person all over the screen. We do it to each other, do it to the people we love the most. I don't know if anybody has family. You love your family. You know they're not going anywhere. Therefore, they're the recipient of the worst parts of us sometimes. They're the ones that get the end of the day where it's just been circling and has nothing to do with your family. It just is, there's a safe place to put it. First step is awareness. The second step is finding a healthy outlet for it. Healthy outlet is not at somebody else. A healthy outlet could be as simple as meditation, taking a few minutes and just be calm. Get it off the same track that it's always been running on. Do you have a person in your life that their mere presence is a high-stress environment for you? Do you know what happened the first time you met them? It wasn't that way. It wasn't that way the first time you met them. They were probably a neutral input to you. But over experience and over you having a narrative that's crafted over time, your brain just says, I see this person, and they make me want to go the other way. They make me want to leave the room. It's because we're not being aware of what's going on. We're not understanding what's happening, and we've built a path for that to go through in our head. And you feel like this person's toxic, which there are toxic people, to be fair. There are people that you're better off away from. But it's sometimes just because we've never been aware of what's actually happening with that input. We're processing it right into that emotional fight or flight area and not putting language to it. Awareness, a healthy outlet, and moving it to the front as quickly as possible. Discussing it, putting language to it. There are jobs for counselors. There are reasons they are, because what they are attempting to do is drag it from that middle, no language, no logic, no analytical skills section of your brain forward to talk about it. Why? Because as soon as you put language to it, you rob it from its emotional energy. You take it out of there. Awareness, healthy outlet, and moving it into an area of your brain where you can talk about it. You can think about it. You can analyze it. Yeah, because John's downstairs and wants to talk about his invoice, creates me stress because, I don't like to be questioned about my invoices. I don't like any of that to happen. I know what I did work for him. I can explain it to him. Let's go down and talk about it. Because his input may be a high-stress environment, and he may try and lob things at me in the midst of this, but I'm prepared for it now. I'm ready to go, and I'll just hear his input. Have you ever talked to somebody that even when you're hot and bothered, and you're like, oh, and you just want to punch somebody, and you're talking to them, they're this cool character. They hear you, and then they pull this little nugget out of your vomit. And they go, yeah, but did you think about this? And you go, oh. And it's like, oh, everything feels better now. That's what you can be for people when you are aware. When you're too much caught up in whatever their vomit is, you start to recycle back and forth each other's vomit, which is pretty disgusting when you think about it. But when you understand, I can put myself in a place where I can process that information the best way possible, with the highest energy level possible, and I can move this through to a place where I'm reasoning it out. Even high stress inputs can be something that you can start to control. Now that's an unfun word. It's already been talked about a couple times in different sections. And each sex has a little bit different mentality, what it means to control your emotions. Controlling your emotions is not suppression. I'm going to say that one more time again. Controlling your emotions is not suppression. Anybody have an idea why it's not suppression?
You never move them to the front.
Yep, you never move them to the front. What happens when you keep them in the back? They keep going. They keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger until they are controlling you without you knowing what's controlling you. Control of emotions is not suppression. And unfortunately, we live in a community, whether through our Germanic, Anabaptist, Mennonite, Appalachian heritage in this community, which, by the way, do you guys know that all four of those meet in Holmes County? It's the strong stoic people. It's the people who never show emotion. It's the control, suppression that is most rewarded. Control means healthy. It means being able to say, I can express this to you in a healthy way. Now, what you can't control is what's going to go on in that person's brain next. But you can be in control. You can be responsible for that healthy expression. You can even come right out and say, this is creating a lot of stress for me right now. And be transparent about it. You can say, I'm having a really tough time with this. That's control in a healthy way because you're expressing it, you're moving it to language. If you are in charge of helping create a culture inside of your business, one of the strongest things you can do for them is help them learn how to healthily express what's going on, because it's not enough just to be right. You got to be wise about this. You've got to help sow seeds of conversation. You've got to help move those things. And it starts with us, each individually, having to say, I'm aware, I have a healthy outlet for this, and I can talk about it. I am in control of the process. I'd like to apologize en masse to the ladies in the room here for any man who ever told you you needed to control your emotions, because we all know what that means, and I'm not qualified to talk about it. Because that's just wrong. Step one, when it comes to emotional intelligence, know and build yourself. Through your IQ, your personality, and your emotional intelligence, grab them and start to build yourself. Work on yourself. Step two, build your team, because you are going to be interacting with these people all the time. Help them, not by telling them what they should be, but help them through expressing it in a healthy way yourself. Lead by example. This is why emotional intelligence is the single greatest determiner of a great leader, and just a leader. Because you start to be able to communicate. You're in control of the processes that are happening to you. And last, reflect, refine, or repeat. Rinse, wash, and repeat. So it's one of those things that this is never going to stop. It takes a long time to change what's going on in our brains and the tracks we've laid down and the paths that it follows every time through. But it is the only part of you that you can change when it comes to being a leader. And so you have to settle in for a long journey towards saying, I am going to be in control of this process. I'm going to understand it. I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to put language to it. That's what emotional intelligence is. Sure, it is talking about your feelings. It is saying, this is causing me stress. It is saying, this really hurt. It is saying, I'm excited about this. But it's also about being a great leader and being in control of what's going on. If you guys have other questions about emotional intelligence or you want to talk to somebody about it, my wife is our HR director at the office. She is amazing. She's done this with our office with MBTI and emotional intelligence. She's down there someplace. Look for Jamie and say Chris sent you. And you can talk to her because she will talk to you about this in Adfinium. She's very good about it. But my hope is, guys, from this, you're at least starting to say, I need to become at least aware of what's going on. So you can start moving in that journey towards control. All right, thanks, guys. Have a great day.